Just say, if unsuccessful, he will turn to the European Court of Human Rights.
In other news, the UN Security Council is preparing to vote on a new draft resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The document prepared by Algeria demands an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, but like other draft resolutions before it, it doesn't condemn Hamas's attacks on October the 7th, which is why the US will almost certainly reject it. In the meantime, the UN says the two largest hospitals in southern Gaza are now essentially non-functional, with dozens of doctors arrested in Israeli military raids and water, electricity and other supplies nearly totally cut off. The Hamas-run health ministry says 100 Palestinians were killed on Monday alone, most of them being women and children. Brian Quinn reports.
Gaza's healthcare system near total collapse. Israeli military raids have reduced functioning at Nasser Medical Center in the southern Gazan city of Khan Yunis to basically nil. The UN and the Red Crescent have mounted patient evacuations as just over a dozen health workers remain to care for some 150 patients with no running water, little electricity, and dwindling supplies.
This is the former emergency department of Nasser Medical Complex, and it's a death zone.
Elsewhere in Khan Yunis, health officials warned that the Al Amal Medical Center is nearly out of food and fuel after a month-long Israeli siege. Healthcare workers describe being targeted by Israeli snipers through the hospital's windows.
Where is the humanity? Why this is happening to us? How many of us have to die? How many of us have to die just to listen to us, to stop these crimes?
Israel claims its forces are raiding Gaza's hospitals with caution to root out Hamas militants that use them for cover. Hamas denies that claim, saying Israel is systematically destroying Gaza's healthcare system in a campaign of ethnic cleansing. Meanwhile, Israeli airstrikes continue on the southern city of Rafah, where some 1.4 million Palestinians are now sheltering after fleeing from elsewhere in the Strip. Israel is threatening a ground assault on Rafah if all remaining hostages are not released by March 10th. International officials say such an invasion would be a recipe for humanitarian catastrophe. After 4 months of devastating bombardment, vast swaths of Gaza have been reduced to rubble, leaving the trapped civilian population with nowhere to flee.
Moving on, and as the 2-year anniversary of the Russian invasion nears, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is warning Russian troops are taking advantage of the delays in the arrival of foreign aid. Zelensky saying that shortages of artillery and longer-range weapons mean Ukrainian soldiers are now facing extremely difficult conditions all along the front line. Gulliver Craig has more from Kramatorsk.
This loss of Avdiivka has certainly been a demoralising blow to the Ukrainian armed forces and symptomatic of the problems that Volodymyr Zelensky was describing in terms of their major deficit in terms of artillery, munitions, drones, everything, basically, and also personnel. So there's really a very, very difficult phase of the war looming for the coming weeks for the Ukrainian armed forces, and the Russians are trying to take advantage of that in several directions, not just here in the Donbass. Volodymyr Zelensky visited troops in Kharkiv region, that's further to the north, where the Russians are trying to take the key town of Kupiansk. Then moving southwards through Donetsk region, there are various different areas in which the Russians are attacking. They say, the Russians themselves, that they're cleaning up now in Avdiivka, consolidating their gains. It's possible that they're having a little bit of an operational pause in that direction while they're concentrating their main efforts in the last 24 hours anyway, on the south, where they seem to be sending troops that have been freed up, possibly now that they're no longer fighting this battle to take control of Avdiivka, and they're trying to cancel out the very modest gains that the Ukrainian counteroffensive made in Zaporizhia region in the south of the country last summer. That's the only place where, according to the people who make the deep state map, which tries to track where exactly the front line is, have made any adjustments to their map overnight. The Russians made some modest advances there in Zaporizhia region. There's also a video posted by those same people, though, showing Ukrainians taking a certain number of Russians prisoner. So the Ukrainians are, of course, fighting back, but as Volodymyr Zelensky and numerous other people are saying, they are finding it very, very difficult at the moment.
4 high-level Egyptian security officials are going on trial this Tuesday in a Rome court, accused in the 2016 abduction, torture and murder of an Italian PhD student in Cairo. Today's hearing is marking the second time the 4 men went on trial in absentia. Giulio Regani's body was found days after he disappeared in the Egyptian capital on January 2016. He was in Cairo to research union activities among street vendors as part of his doctoral thesis. His mother and others saying his body showed signs of torture. To South Korea now, and in a showdown with the government, 6,500 doctors have handed in letters of resignation over plans to increase the number of doctors trained. The government says the increase is needed to meet the needs of an ageing population, while the doctors complain that they were not consulted. The reforms are calling for a 65% increase in the number of students admitted to medical schools starting from next year. Antonio Kerrigan tells us more.
Disruption has already begun, with surgeries delayed and cancelled as junior doctors resign en masse. Objecting to a government plan to increase the number of medical school admissions from 3,000 to 5,000 per year, they claim there are enough physicians and that an increase could lead to unnecessary medical procedures, which would put pressure on the National Health Insurance Scheme. But it's an argument many find disingenuous and self-serving.
I feel like the doctors are using sick people. I hope they find a compromise with the government and that they'll get back to work quickly so that patients don't miss their treatment.
South Korea has only 2.6 doctors per 1,000 people, the lowest ratio of any OECD country other than Mexico. But with a 90% private hospital system, their scarcity keeps their income high. So with 10,000 more doctors by 2035, as per the government's stated aim, their pay could take a hit. But President Yoon Suk-yeol defended the measure and said the government would stand firm.
의료 서비스의 수요는 빠르게 증가하고 있습니다만
The demand for medical care has been rapidly increasing, but the needs cannot be met. In particular, the number of doctors in essential fields has drastically dropped and led to the collapse of essential medical services in rural areas.
지역 필수 의료도 함께 붕괴되었습니다.
Particularly lacking in rural areas are essential paediatricians and emergency doctors, fields seen as less attractive than plastic surgery or dermatology. The president added that the fast-ageing population would create further gaps. The country's labour law limits doctors' right to strike, and ringleaders who can be proven to have encouraged others to stop work are being threatened with arrest.
Now, here's some incredible statistics for you. Australian researchers have discovered a quasar powered by a massive black hole, 17 billion times the size of our sun, that shines almost 500 trillion times brighter. And it's 12 billion light years away. However, according to scientists, it's been hiding in plain sight, as Brian Quinn explains.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, the light from what could be the brightest object ever discovered began traveling towards Earth. On Monday, a team of scientists revealed that what for decades had been believed to be a star relatively close to Earth is in fact a quasar so distant that the light we now see dates to near the creation of the universe.
It's a time when we astronomers get to be children again. And we expected this to be just a normal star because of how bright it looks, but in fact it's within 1.5 billion years of the universe's existence, and it's just so extraordinary when we identify this object.
Quasars are supermassive black holes surrounded by accretion disks of material being pulled in by gravity. As that material approaches event horizon, it heats up, emitting vast amounts of radiation. This quasar, known as J0529-4351, is 12 billion light years away. The black hole at its center, 17 billion times the mass of our sun, its accretion disk pouring out 500 trillion times the sun's light. The team, led by scientists at Australian National University, confirmed their findings with help from the European Southern Observatory's outpost in Atacama, Chile. Quasars emit light relative to the growth of their black hole, and this is the fastest ever discovered, devouring the equivalent of one sun per day.
And that's it for this edition. Do stay with us here on France 24.
How is that someone can go from being a total stranger to being the most important person in your life?
Fashion needs a new leader. Monsieur Dior.
Fashion, film and literature inspire this month's TV series selection with an update of the 2005 film Mr. and Mrs. Smith, a series based on David Nicholls' hit novel One Day, and wartime fashion drama The New Look. Well, our TV critic Deeptika Laurent is here to take us through it all. Hi, Deepti.
Hi, Olivia.
Now, let's start with In Her Car. This is a Ukrainian drama that was shot in Kyiv just after the war began.
Yeah, that's right. In Her Car, it's a European co-production between between Ukraine and France, Germany, Sweden, Denmark, Iceland, Norway, Finland, and Switzerland. The story starts in February 2022. Lydia, the main character, is a psychologist. She gets in her car and drives from Kyiv to Kharkiv to get her husband to sign divorce papers. As she's driving, the first Russian bombs fall on the country. She decides to become a taxi driver for stranded Ukrainians fleeing from one end to the other, one city to another, and also is at the same time trying to get to the bottom of her sister's mysterious death some years before.
Okay, so the public and the private mix there. Well, the first 5 episodes getting simultaneous release across Europe on February 21st. That's just a few days before the second anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Deepti spoke to Eugene Tunik, the Kyiv-based showrunner, about the challenges of filming in Ukraine during the war. Take a look.
There's a lot of problems, of course, like curfew. We can film only from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. maximum, because after that we have to go home and you can't see any person on the streets in Ukraine, in any cities. We had a lot of air raid alarms, and actors, the crew, everybody has to go to the shelter and stay there until the air warning alarm will end. I hope that In Her Car, this series will be a sign for a lot of Ukrainian filmmakers, not only filmmakers, but also other industries maybe, that Ukrainian stories and Ukrainian product has some kind of quality and it's needed in Europe. And the example of our series could show that we can work together and much more better than with Russia.
So obviously, Olivia, the war was a catalyst for Eugene Tunik, and it's something he said in his interview that the series would not have been made if it had not been for the war. But the show is really created with care and deliberation in ensuring that the war doesn't overwhelm the personal stories, which are really the main idea of the series. Each episode features a new passenger and a new story. So you have one story about 2 sisters who are fighting over a man, or you have a French couple who've come to visit their son who's living in Ukraine. All these sort of ordinary problems that are suddenly upended by this war. It also captures the fear, the uncertainty, and darkness that engulfed Ukraine and Ukrainians just after the Russian invasion. situation. You have the sheer terror of bomb explosions, the paranoia of who's an enemy, who's not an enemy. There's no exaggeration here. This is just life. And Anastasia Karpenko is really incredible as Lydia. She's very stoic, and there's one episode that really strikes me where she has to transport her husband's much younger girlfriend across the country, and it turns out to be a very surprisingly tender journey between two women caught in this war.
Sounds like a very powerful insight into daily life there. Well, next we're going to the multi-hyphenate actor, musician, showrunner Donald Glover. He's behind this new updated TV series remake of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which is out on Prime Video. Now, the original film starred Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, for those of us who remember it.
Yeah, that's right. The film launched Brangelina, for better or for worse. Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie in the film played two spies who discover they've been hired to kill each other. In the TV series, co-creator Donald Glover and Maya Erskine are spies John and Jane Smith, posing as a married couple who must carry out violent operations. And as you guessed it, they eventually fall for each other. It's garnered a lot of positive reactions among TV critics for the way it's updated the film in a very fresh, modern way. Take a look.
You break the legs and I break the arms. We're gonna have our gunfights and shoot 'em ups and explosions. Of course that's gonna happen. But we really wanted to tone it down to like a 2, so when you did something that was a 10, it felt like 100. Hero said there's C students in an AP class. They're really not supposed to be here.
You don't know how to ski?
It was really important to us that the show felt global and grounded, but very bizarre, surreal comedy.
What is it that you two do?
We're software engineers. Administer single dose, no casualties.
What? Do you think if the company hadn't matched you, you'd be compatible?
You're sitting underneath a shelter I made. I made this fire. I got you this fish.
Shelter, food, fire, water. No.
Maybe.
And as you see there, the series really blends action, romance, violence. It's also a bit of farcical comedy thrown in there as well. And there are really great on-the-nose references in the show. The first scene of the first episode features a very good-looking couple who look conspicuously like Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie getting obliterated in a shootout. So that really sets a tone for this very not-so-subtle message about how different the TV series is to the film. And also, you could have seen in the trailer there, the protagonists are not cookie-cutter. They're not perfect. They're scrappy. They're insecure. They're awkward. Sometimes they don't know what they're doing. And it makes them very endearing. You know, there's a scene where they have to get rid of a body in a very gross way, and both of them can't do it because they're retching on the side. So it's just these kind of comedic moments. I also love the blink and miss him cameos by super famous actors and actresses like Sarah Paulson, but also Alexander Skarsgård. For me, though, perhaps the weakest part of the show is the love story itself. It develops very quickly, sometimes feels a bit contrived, in my opinion.
Okay, looks like a bit of fun, though.
Yeah.
Well, that series is now in Prime Video's top 5 series debuts ever, so definitely a fan favourite. And another show that's being held by fans and critics as well is One Day. That's based on David Nicholls' hit novel, romance of the same name, and it's out on Netflix. He's written this series as well. He was involved in making it.
Yeah, that's right. He was involved in making this series One Day, which is garnering rave reviews for its delicate, heart-wrenching portrayal of love and grief. Unlike the 2011 film starring Anne Hathaway and Tom Sturridge, which was, universally panned, this is really being quite well received. Dexter Mayhew, he's a charismatic posh boy who's had an easy life and he struggles to make his mark in adulthood. Working-class Emma Morley has had to fight for all her successes, and the two meet quite improbably on their last day of college. And each episode traces one day over the next 2 decades of their slow-burn romance. Take a look.
He still makes with Dexter. He's doing all right for himself.
Pizza Express would have been fine. After we met, I had a bit of a crush on you.
So what happened to it? His crush.
Back in the late 80s, it was all I thought about.
And now?
I thought I finally got rid of you.
I don't think you can.
So you mentioned the film version was a bit of a flop. You might ask why it needed updating with this series. What did you make of it?
Well, it was pretty incredible, actually. It's incredible chemistry between these two leads, Leo Woodhall and Ambika Mudd. Woodhall, you might recognize him from HBO's The White Lotus.
Yes.
Dexter, his character is awful. He's arrogant, he's entitled, but Leo Woodhall manages to bring a bit of vulnerability to his character that makes him redeemable time and time again. Ambika Mudd, she's just incredible. A real revelation with her Emma. She brings this sort of sarcastic humor and straight shooting. I also read that she nailed the accent, that lead's accent, in 2 days for the audition, so I imagine that's not easy to do either.
No, absolutely not.
And also lovely 90s nostalgia, great music like Lilac Wine by Jeff Buckley. You have the verve as well, the costumes, the hairstyles really reflect each changing year. And I think ultimately the series format enables a greater exploration of these characters and the shifting power balances between them and how that changes their dynamic. It's something that really struck me in the book, but I think wasn't conveyed in the film. But a warning, you will need tissues for this one. It's very sad.
Oh, okay. Well, nice update for the rom-com there. Well, finally, it's a new month, and that means we've got new fashion drama in the form of The New Look. That's on Apple TV+, and it traces the rise of Christian Dior, Coco Chanel, and all their couture contemporaries during the Second World War.
Yeah, it's quite a departure from your usual biopic. This takes us into the heart of Paris under Nazi occupation during the Second World War, where Chanel, Dior, Balmain, Givenchy, Balenciaga, and Cardin all tried to survive, sometimes also making questionable moral choices. Juliette Binoche plays Coco Chanel, who was already well established when the war broke out. She also controversially collaborated with the Nazis in various ways. Ben Mendelsohn, he plays Dior, who was actually up and coming at the time, but he made gowns for the wives and girlfriends of Nazi officers. The series really encourages us to judge those decisions in a historical context, while also depicting how violence shaped post-war fashion. Personally, the French accents are a bit grating. And apart from Juliette Binoche, there are no other French actors playing the leads, and I think that was a bit of a shame. In any case, it's an interesting series. The new look is named after the name that Dior gave his first fashion collection in 1947. It was a symbol of French hope and recovery. So it's a very unique take on fashion, and we've had a lot of fashion biopics recently, so it's a very nice departure from that. I think it's worth having a look at.
That new look, certainly an iconic silhouette. I suppose we'll leave it to you to decide whether it's style or substance. Deeply, thank you very much for that roundup this week. Do check in with us here on Arts24 and on our website and social media for more arts, culture, movie and shows. We'll leave you with a peek at the new look that's just coming up.
Your house will be magnificent.
You think Dior is special? Real talent is turning your life into something bigger.
People need to feel, dream, and it will live again. We can create a new world for them.
On France24.com, click live. Find the stories you want to watch or to read about. Live news 24 hours a day in 4 languages. Explore the topics that captivate you. Are you looking for the latest news or to watch a show on demand? Follow us. Live international news is just a click away. Liberté, égalité, actualité.
Africa News, your eyes on Africa. Bringing you the latest from across the continent.
Eye on Africa, presented by Georgia Calvin-Smith. On France 24 and France24.com.
Lawyers for Julian Assange launch what may be his final bid to avoid extradition to the US to face trial over leaking military secrets. Also, the UN Security Council is preparing once again to vote on a new draft resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. And as the second anniversary of Putin's invasion nears, Ukraine's president warning his troops are facing extremely difficult conditions all along the front line with Russia, while ammunition and other supplies are at a critical low. Hello and welcome back to the France 24 newsroom. I'm Annette Young. And we begin in London, where lawyers for the WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange are making a last-ditch attempt to fight his extradition to the US, where he could face life in jail if convicted of spying charges. Their hearing in the High Court will consider whether the Australian-born national can be granted leave to appeal against an extradition decision made back in 2022 by the then UK Home Secretary Priti Patel. Assange has been held in Belmarsh prison for almost 5 years. He was too unwell to attend the hearing this Tuesday, but his wife Stella Assange has been speaking outside the court.
There is no possibility of a fair trial if Julian is extradited to the United States. He should never be extradited to the United States. He would never be safe. The United States plotted to murder my husband. He is being accused of journalism. This case is an admission by the United States that they now criminalize investigative journalism. It's an attack on all journalists all over the world. It's an attack on the truth, and it's an attack on the public's right to know. Julian is a political prisoner, and his life is at risk. What happened to Navalny can happen to Julian. He has to be released. This farce has to end.
Julian Assange's wife Stella talking there to reporters. In the meantime, Oliver Ferry has more.
Julian Assange was first thrust into the public eye in 2010 when the site he founded, WikiLeaks, posted this leaked video showing an Apache helicopter airstrike by the US military in Iraq, in which civilians and 2 Reuters journalists were killed. WikiLeaks subsequently revealed 700,000 classified documents on US military and diplomatic activities, particularly regarding the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
It's clear that it will shape an understanding of what the past 6 years of war has been like. And that the course of the war needs to change.
Most of the documents were acquired thanks to Chelsea Manning, a former US soldier whose 35-year sentence for espionage was commuted in 2017. The document dump put Assange in Washington's crosshairs. 10 days earlier, a case against him for rape and sexual assault against 2 women had been opened in Sweden. Assange has always denied the charges, and to evade extradition, in 2012 he obtained political asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. WikiLeaks continued operating, and during the 2016 US presidential elections published a trove of emails from Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton's server. Things got complicated for Assange in 2019. A change of government in Ecuador resulted in the country withdrawing its asylum. Upon leaving the embassy, he was immediately arrested by British police. The charges against Assange in Sweden were eventually dropped, but the US Justice Department indicted him for espionage.